Hello, welcome. As everyone's filing in, welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 706th New Social Environment. I'm Carolyn, a Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Prune Nourry and Yasmeen Siddiqui. We're thrilled to welcome poet Manal Kara here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter, and that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for actual necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the stolen land we are speaking from. And now to introduce today's guest and host. Born in 1985, Paris, France, Prune Nourry is a multidisciplinary artist based in New York. Nourry has a degree in wood sculpture from Ecole Boulle in Paris and explores bioethics through sculpture as well as video, photography, and performance. Her work has been featured worldwide. Guiding editor and writer Yasmeen Siddiqui is the founding director of Minerva Projects. Her practice is an overarching commitment to testing perceptions of either specific artists or existing art movements through the synchronized interplay of writing and exhibition making. Thank you all so much for joining today. I'll turn it over to you, Yasmeen.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for that lovely introduction, and everyone for being here, and the Rail for generously thinking of me as someone to speak with Prune. I'm very fascinated by the many strands that I see and many see in your work. So for the purposes of today, we've broken the mold a little bit. We're in Prune's studio, which is such a luxury that I fully embrace. We're going to really focus on your current show as center stage. But there are certain themes that will touch on past projects. So we have a couple of cursory images, but you'll really, for the audience, you'll be fully enmeshed in the show that just opened in Lagos. Why don't we start there? Can you tell everyone, what the contents of that is? Briefly, we'll get into the details of the workshops and the process and even the making. But for now, just where it is, what it's in its meat.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Yasmeen, for all your questions. I'm looking forward to them. It's improvisation. I didn't read them before.
Yeah.
So the show is happening right now in Lagos. I was there about 10 days ago. We opened it with the whole team. It's a collaborative show. We've been working on it since 1 year already. It's all the project happened in Ile-Ife in Nigeria, and Ile-Ife is an imperial city from the 15th century that is the inspiration for the project. We are many people part of it, and we all met along the way during that past year, and we all gathered twice in the late months. Once was for the workshop happening on September the 30th in Ile-Ife, and the second time was for the opening of the exhibition on the 19th of November in Lagos.
Beautiful. Okay, so to help provide a bit of context, some sound for the work you will see in stills, we'd like to show the trailer for the project. Carolyn, if you can do that so that everyone can get a sense. And this project is in line with a series of projects that Prune has developed. And so a lot of the methodology here you see in past work. Anyway, so thank you. It'll just take a second to pull it up. It's 1 minute long and change.
Apologies, just having trouble.
Buffering. It'll.
Perhaps we can move on briefly while I try to.
Of course. Yes, of course. Okay. So actually, this will lead in beautifully, I hope. We'll see. So you have described your work as a sculptor as being akin to a healer. And this can happen on the level of community, repairing history, and then within the body itself. And I'm curious to know how that plays in with this project.
So I didn't define myself like that. It's more during a trip with my team in China, following the burial of the army that I've made in 2015 there. A friend of mine who was shooting with me, a DOP, she said, oh, what would be your biggest wish? If you could be anyone, if you could be a superhero, what would be your superpower? And right away, without even thinking about it, and I had never thought about it, I said I would dream to be able to heal with my hands. And she said right away, but that's what you're doing, white sculpting. And you know, it struck me as a kind of wish that I don't even dream to achieve. But in a way, going back into my work, it's a lot about healing, like the project Imbalance, for example. Even if it's called Imbalance, it's using acupuncture needles, acupuncture cups. It's about equilibrium and disequilibrium because they are both interlaced, obviously. So like Eros and Thanatos, you know, like the life and death, the beginning of life and the end of life. So all of that, the cycle of life, the creation, myth of creation, are really embedded into my work, as well as the notion of balance and imbalance, so of healing and hope. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think if you'll see in the video, just even the transference. Oh, is it coming up?
Yeah, we're just Chloe's pulling it up.
Okay, so this is great. And as a segue into what we see happening here.
Don't forget the sound, always very important.
Yeah, it's critical.
Ori means head. This head is now going to the history of the nation itself. We are at a point in history where we are dealing with marauders, we are dealing with bandits who just come and capture people. We cannot just forget.
These are the moms of the women, our sisters, who were taken, who were kidnapped when armed men stormed the school. It's been 8 years, and their babies are still gone.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Great. If we can just go back to the images, that would be terrific. So, okay. Now, so why don't we set the ground because this method of working with history, with people, tracks back in your work. So how did this come about as an opportunity, as an area of interest for you?
In fact, going back, I would say, to some of my first projects, which were talking about human selection and the preference for male gender, so gender preference, and how we can use science to select the baby girl when it's a girl and abort if it's a girl. And I started by a project called the Procreative Dinner, which was all about the different stage of selection, human selection, and the gender was part of it as one of the main choice that we can do today, thanks to the help of science, which is an issue because it's getting to the point of normality, getting to the point of designers, babies, getting to the point of the limit, the risk of eugenism. And then I did a project when I first arrived in New York in 2011 called the Sperm Bar, which was especially a reflection about the business of sperm banks and the business of choosing, selecting your kid. And so obviously gender again was part of it. And it led me to another project called Holy Daughters, a project in India, because 1/3 of the population is India and China, and speaking about gender imbalance, I thought it would make sense to go first to these countries. And so I went to India and worked with sociologists that I've met through different sociologists I've been working with in Europe for a long time, like Christophe Guilmoto. And I left to India and met Ravinder Kaur, an incredible woman sociologist and anthropologist, and she was working especially on that subject and became my collaborator on a project called Holy Daughters, where I was creating hybrids between the holy cow and the daughter.
Which you can jump to an image of. I think there's one near the end.
And so that project, Holy Daughters,
yes, on the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
On the cow,
yes.
I mean the river.
The other one, sorry, the one with all the men around the sculpture.
There.
Yeah, okay. So that was the first step of the Holy Daughters project, where I left to New Delhi with my sculptures. One was standing, another one was squatting with glass eyes, and I was abandoning them in the streets of New Delhi in front of what you saw behind. It's called Mother Diaries, and this is a distributor, milk distributors, where people goes every day with the old school farm pot, and they put some money in the box, and you have some milk coming from, you know, the farm going right away in those boxes. So it's like an everyday rituals. And suddenly to have the sculptures in front, I was putting them and disappearing. I was there just with my camera like a journalist, and I was asking questions about what this was. And this, the image that you see right here, is the first 3 minutes where I've put the first sculpture, not knowing what was going to happen. And I don't know how all these men gathered around the sculptures in really 3 minutes and were touching it, pushing it to watch at the sex of the sculpture, smiling, but a bit disturbed at the same time, and all looking at it. This is not a staged picture. And I was just, you know, in front of that and asking questions. So I made a movie about it, like gathering reactions of everyone, because what I was interested here was what people would think from that sculpture. So I wanted to learn about the glance, the eye, the perspective of the people watching at it. And right after that was January 2011, this happened in September 2010. I did a show about this project, like a question mark about the sex ratio census that happens every 10 years in India. And everyone since the 70s, since Amartya Sen, a demographer, said that there were a huge imbalance between boys and girls in India, said, take care, we have to do something about it. So 20 years after, 30 years after, some laws were created, like the dowry was forbidden, things like that, big things. So everyone was waiting to the 2011 sex ratio census, thinking that everything would be better. And it turned out it was the worst result they had ever seen. So I decided not to stop here, but to make another project, this time with craftsmen. And it was my first real collaboration with craftsmen in Kumartuli, which is one of the neighborhood of Kolkata, where I dreamt to go. Like I just found, you know, researching like a sculptor would research about powders and clay. And I found those images, incredible images of a village living, like a neighborhood of Calcutta, living with the gray color of the clay coming out from the Ganges River, so the holy river. And they were sculpting every year deities out of the clay of that river. And then once a year during the pujas, so a procession through the streets, they would process the sculpture, the deities, Ganesh, Durga, and push them back into the Ganges River where they come from. And I just decided, you know, to try a new deity there and to do it following all the codes and respecting all the traditions. So I met with a family from Kolkata who with me went to a craftsman and asked for a craftsman to realize one of the deity, but it would be the Holy Daughter deity. And we processed through the streets of Kolkata with the Hindu prayers of the family until the Ganges River, where we pushed it back to the river. And the beauty of it for me was to see that along the way of the procession, people were in fact, if you want to show just the image of the sculpture in front of the Ganges River, it's the next one. Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, this one. So this one is just reprojecting on clay. That's why you see the material on it. So this sculpture, along the way, people were in fact touching it, blessing kids' heads with it, and calling it Gau Mata, which means the mother cow. So they were in fact giving names to the sculpture and giving it a life where it didn't exist. Holy cow existed, but there were no hybrids like you would have for Ganesh between the cow animal and the human.
And so that's fascinating as well, just that the dynamic of a procession and the power. And that was one thing I wanted to talk about, the role of ritual in your overarching practice. And as it comes up in your most current work, it really is brought to a head with this. And I was fascinated with watching that morphing from, yes, these hybrid creatures that are placed in New Delhi, placed in the street, and the reaction. There are amazing images you can look up and footage of them and children playing with them, the interactive element, but then going deeper into the fiber of community and really beginning what you now have taken to a whole, taken even further with an engagement. But the idea of the openness of the human mind and heart to a new form, and allowing that to sit within a larger ancient tradition is really powerful to me. And so, I'm going to stop now. So my question is, what other ways have you toyed with and ritual?
That's a good question. Ritual, definitely, I discovered it along the way, became central for me into the way I place my work into a discussion, a dialogue, because in fact, you learn more when you put it in a place where people will have a totally genuine reaction towards it than if you just put a label and say, oh, this is what I wanted to say. No, because that doesn't work like this. You want to leave the space to the imagination, and not only the imagination of the other, but finally also your imagination, because it's a dialogue, so a nourishment, you give, you take, you give. It's like that dialogue, which is why I was never really interested into provocation, because when you provoke, unless there is humor and it's part, of a discussion, but pure provocation for me, it's not my way of expression, because then you miss the dialogue that you have after, where you learn so many things out of the perspective of the other.
Which you achieve in a magnificent way with these hybrids, even the posture, the squatting, the facial structure. It's not they're unusual in that as sculpture, they don't feel like objects, or there's something in your process that imbues them with energy and spirit that's very powerful.
Thank you for
and
saying
so I
that.
can see this. I can see how you're trying in that way, among all sorts of ways, to afford opportunity for this back and forth.
I think that's one of the obsession of any sculptor since thousands of years. Like everyone knows the Pygmalion story, but the fact that he fell in love with his sculpture, and she became alive. So the fact of breathing life into a sculpture is why we called the project Statues Also Breathe, for different reasons, but we can go back to it later. But one of the sculpture that you have right here behind you, this one is in fact a kind of it's left, what's left after molding the walking Holy Daughters, which is one of the life-size Holy Daughters from the project in India we just talked about. And I sculpted it exactly here where you are, Yasmeen, in that studio some years ago. And I remember that the foundry was coming to help me mold it in the morning, 8 a.m. And I had to finish it that night because I knew there weren't any other options for the molding. So I was alone in that studio. It was maybe 5 a.m. And I remember going out to the bathroom and coming back. And then it struck me, she was looking at me. I wasn't looking at her anymore. She was looking at me. And that's when I knew that she was done. So there were a few details to be done, but she was, ready.
Yeah. No, I can see. And then how you take that, so this, and then transfer that capacity en masse. So we can maybe go to the image of, and think about the statues, breathing like in the statues, and walking the students. Can you describe the workshop? And then we'll talk about China. But right now, I would love to talk about the Ife sculptures. And
absolutely.
Can we look at an image of the workshop? Down.
More down. No, that's at the exhibition. That's the educational part.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Where you see the green grass. Yes, perfect.
Yes. So can you describe what happened here, how this worked?
So that day, if you have also, Caroline, the image with the 108 sculpture, that we can have a bird view to understand more the geographic of the place, that would be great. You must have that down there. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Okay, so that day on September the 30th, 108 students came for a workshop that we organized with different universities, but mainly the Ife University, all the arts departments, the teachers and lecturers from that university, because Ile-Ife, as I mentioned, was in the 15th century imperial, beautiful, incredible city. But also in the 70s was very well known for a very incredible university that was not only international, but also multidisciplinaries, where they were mixing, and they are still, it's part of the ecosystem, the motto of the university, to mix disciplines together: philosophy, anthropology, science, art. So when I had in mind that project a few years ago, I knew I wanted to collaborate with craftsmen. But when I started to do research, it was very hard to still find craftsmen in Ile-Ife. And I realized that in the 15th century, you had so many craftsmen. In the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, less and less and less, a bit in bronze, a bit in clay. But suddenly, in our time, it was so hard to find. And I had an intuition that we had to go and see at the university. And me and my team at Ubuntu, with the producer of the project and really the magician behind the scene, we went together. And there was someone with a pot on the head going, along the roads of the university. We just followed that students. And at some point, we discovered the arts department with incredible teachers, incredible art pieces, kilns, clay, everything we were dreaming of. So it was really like a kind of treasure hunt. And it was a love at first words, because when we started to discuss with the teachers, and they told me about the motto of the university and their vision and their, the way they were engaged, even into a university on strike since 10 months, all the wishes they had for their students was large. So we decided, to start the collaboration, and we created the project together.
This is beautiful.
But the university, as I mentioned, was on strike.
Yes.
And we were during the rainy seasons, and we decided to do a project outside with 108 students, where everyone, in fact, went back home in many different places of the country. So this project was also a lot of logistics because we had to invite them and organize for them the transportation for them to be able to attend the workshop. So they arrived the day before, they slept on the university campus. Some of them were coming from the university itself, from IFE, but some came from Lagos, some came from Cross River, from Port Harcourt. So it was incredible because that I didn't plan, in a way, but it what happened because of the strike, and it was even more powerful to know that all these students were coming from all across the country. So we meet in the morning and we know that we have 12 hours to create unique pieces that they're going to sign at the end of the day. I didn't tell them at the time that I was trying to work on an exhibition in Lagos because I wasn't sure I could make it happen. And that was a fear for me to promise something that I couldn't, do. So they were working on the heads that in fact were already prepared from 8 original that I had sculpted from May to July. Then we did the molds, 8 molds at the IFE University. We casted them with 8 students and 8 potters from Ilorin, which is on Yoruba land, which is a community of female potters. And it was a way to bring the countryside to the university, which is a concept that was very important also for the teachers of the university, and to bring back craftsmanship into the university. And we found that incredible female community of potters that were from generations to generations. We met the woman leading it, and she sent with her 8 young female potters, and it was a way also to teach them. The teachers from the university were teaching them another type of techniques than the pots that they could bring back home. So from the 8 molds, we made the 108 bases, so casts, and we kept them into wet cloths that they would wait for about 10 days that the workshop would happen. And on the day of the workshop, each of the students came, took one sculpture under their arm, walked to the field where we had made especially the bases for it. Some of the bases, definitely we made them for the university, and they stay at the university. We also created, we built a workshop in concrete, a giant workshop where they can, we made all the casts, but that is long lasting for the students because they were dreaming of another workshop. It was too small, the one they had. And so it was really like how we could think with the teacher, how this workshop could also have some impact on the long lasting, because for the teacher, it was not only about one day, it was about a long term project. So we had the 108 students being each of them in front of one of the sculpture stands, having one image that we distributed of one of the missing girls from Chibok, given by the families that they were there that day. And they had also the images of the Ife heads from the 15th century. So each of them were in a way, had the responsibility to embody, to personify, to mix, but to personify the absence of one of the girls of Chibok. And it was a huge responsibility, but a huge also, I believe, catharsis for all of us and for the students, because the parents were here. Some girls who escaped were here. They arrived after a few hours of them starting to sculpt, and to have them walking through the lines of sculptures, trying to recognize their daughters or their friends through all the portraits that the students were having in hands and were trying to embody. That was one of the most powerful thing I've ever witnessed. Sure. And also just the fact of gathering all these portraits it's not like there is, you know, an online website where you can find some pictures. It's not like that. It's something that takes time, that takes love from the families themselves. You have Mr. Yakubu, who is the head of the Association of the Chibok Parents, who himself lost 8 of his relatives into the Chibok kidnapping, and became right away, like he said, okay, I have to do something. So he started this organization, and since 8 years, he's trying to keep it, you know, allowed that people don't forget the girls that are still missing. And the fact of you know, having Mr. Yakubu in person, going and gathering and asking to all the families that some are in Nigeria, but some are not anymore in Nigeria. He went to, he called onto the Canada for some families to manage to gather all these pictures. And so finally we had them and we distributed them to the students. But I think that it was quite abstract until the moment the families arrived and started to go and recognize, you know, their own loved ones.
Yeah, the pathos and joy and yeah, just kind of some sort of resolution that must have been in the air, I can imagine, and then a connection. And as well to have an event like that continues, but to have it connect people who don't know each other as well, that a national memory, trauma, a national trauma of this. And that's incredible. And so there's one, I want to make sure we don't lose track of one. You use or you reference numbers often, and I'm very interested. So you have this, which to me it evokes in your work, especially your play with temporality, history, time is fascinating. It seems so core to your larger project of thinking about the human condition and how memory is transferred. But the 108, so I do, and so this kind of connects to your project in China with the Terracotta Daughters. That's also 108, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, so are we able to flip to there a couple of, so I don't want to bounce around too much because it can become incredibly, Prune has a very active practice over time, so it can, I'm trying to pull a few themes, but
You can show the army in China, exactly this one, super nice.
Okay, so maybe describe this, because this as well.
So here you have so an army of girls, which is right here shown in a museum in Mexico City, which is the Anahuacalli Diego Rivera Museum. But the sculptures were made in China from 2012 to 2013. I worked for a year in Xi'an, where the soldiers are, but also where the university, at the university Xi'an Jiaotong, you have scientists, sociologists that I met through Ravinder Kaur, the Indian sociologist I've been working with. She introduced me to them, saying, oh, you should do something for China too. And I was like, already having an idea in mind, but I didn't want to talk about it before to make sure I could, you know, build that army. So I met them, documented like I do for every project where I start by interviewing and researching about a project. And when in fact they said, okay, what do you have in mind? I said, give me a few months. And I left to the suburb of Xi'an, where the soldiers are, in fact, 40 minutes away from Xi'an. And it's a small, you know, town called Lintong. And I was searching from places to places, craftsmen working on copying the terracotta soldiers. Since they've been discovered in the 70s, some studios, craftsmen studios opened and make reproduction and sell them to the tourists, Chinese tourists mainly. And so I had in mind to go copy the copists. And so I was searching for the right studio to work with. It took me days and days and days until, by luck, by an interview, by interviewing one of the teachers of the Beaux-Arts school, of Xi'an, I met one student who led me to that lost building, lost factory behind the mall, a crazy, timeless, red bricks like Brooklyn, like we have in front of us, factory with, you know, all windows broken and birds everywhere, and a light, a beautiful light. As soon as I entered into that place, I knew it was the one. And when I met the craftsman, same, I had that intuition, especially with one, Wen Xianfeng, who became my partner on that project. And Wen Xianfeng was making copies of the soldiers, but not sculpting them, just making the molds and the cast and the molds and the casts. But along the way, while I was sculpting the 8 originals, I realized he had a sculptor's talent, because we couldn't speak the same language. I didn't speak, he was speaking a dialect, not Mandarin, and he wasn't speaking English. I wasn't speaking the dialect, or even, you know, a few words of Mandarin, that's it. And in fact, we were talking a sculptor's language. I could see each time there was something I wasn't sure about while sculpting the 8 originals, he would be there and tells me, something here, you know, or I would search for a tool in the studio and I would say, where is the chisel? And he would be there and give me the chisel. It was like a crazy connection. And so I had that abstract idea at first of making 8 originals, and from the 8 originals, like a game I was playing when I was a kid with Who is Who, I would take the head, the bust, and the legs, and, you know, mix them to create a whole unique army. But then I read that at the time, 2000 years ago, the real soldiers had been done with the name of the craftsman behind, that you knew who has done what. So I don't think it was for the good reasons. It was more to see if one of them didn't do the right thing and buried with you know, with the army. But I took that idea and I was like, this is the, you know, I should search for the craftsman who, and suddenly I have Xianfeng in front of me and I'm like, no, it's not about many craftsmen, it's about him. And he has that potential. And at first he was like, no way, no. First, I don't believe in your army because it's an army of girls. Everyone knows that an army is made of men and boys, not girls. And anyway, you take an ancestral, you know, like symbol of ours, and you turn it into something, you know, just girls. No, that doesn't work. And after a year, you know, working side by side, he saw me make the 8 originals. He saw me, like, you know, I brought the girls who were the 8 orphans I based the project on, came, I invited them to the workshop to see the soldiers. He was there, he played with clay with them, all of that. After, you know, months and months of working together, making the molds, finally it was his babies, his army. And I remember that shift. And he told me, I don't feel comfortable. Give me a list of what you want me to achieve and change features on each of them. And because the idea was from the 8 original and the combination, he would change every faces to make them all unique, and he would sign the 108. I had my 8, he had the 108, which would become an indivisible army, one piece that I had in mind to bury in China in a secret place until 2030. So he says, what should I do? You know, like, tell me. And I'm like, no, it's your creation. You're going to sign it. So you have to change. And so he, you know, changed some of the feature of the eyes, of the nose, of the mouth. He went outside of the school of his daughter and started to make some, you know, sketches and get some inspiration, and then go back to the studio. And it really turned into being, you know, his kids. When the army was done, so you were talking about the numbers, it was 108. So it was based on 8 originals plus 108. I have to say that I chose the number 8 because 8, for me, not only it's a lucky number in China and I wanted it to make sense in China, but it's also a number that is global as a symbol of infinity. And because the girls are made of earth and we're going back to earth as I had planned to bury them from the beginning, you know, it made sense to me. But then I was, okay, for the army, how many should I do? 800, I cannot. I'm 25, I'm self-financing all these projects. It's too much. 88, I felt like under 100 doesn't interest me. So I went randomly to the number 108. And I remember when traveling the army after around the world, here in New York, during a conference I had, one Chinese student raised her hand and she was like, but that number 108, do you know it's very important in Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism? It's 1-0 infinity. And I was like, wow, thank you. So see how you learn when you don't explain things, because sometimes it's about the guts and you have the explanation after. So that number 108, when it turned that I was gonna do the army with the University of Ife and the students in Nigeria, we were thinking, okay, what number? And at that time, discussing with Mr. Yakubu, the number of the girls missing, it wasn't never exactly clear, but it was 109 was one of the number that keeps coming back. So we said we're going to do 109. And I kept making the mistakes, like saying 108, 109. So I started to sculpt the 8 originals. And a few days after I finished the little sculpture head, the second one, I received a phone call from my team and Mr. Yakubu, and they say, Prune, how that you just sculpted escaped from Boko Haram. So from the 8 that I was sculpting, right at the second one, we received that news. So we decided to turn the number to 108 because she escaped. She's a symbol from turning from 109 to 108.
That's very powerful. That's incredible. Yeah. So these are the patterns that organize and life broadly just always amaze me. And that was when I was looking at your work, I was struck by that. It's very powerful.
I think it's also the word mystery.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't want to explain everything.
Yeah. No, I know, but I think that patterning and that connection over so many years.
But things explain by themselves.
Yes, they do. It's just, allowing dynamics to breathe.
Of
Serendipity, exactly. So then, okay, so then, which leads me into, with these, the Terracotta Daughters, you've explained the origin of the form. Oh, but could we switch to, well, we can do that in a second, actually. I was going to ask you about the origin of the form, just for people who are here to understand the head, Yoruba head. Could you describe that? But
for the China project.
The head in Ife.
Okay.
Can you describe that form? Because it's an important.
So we should get back
to a picture of one of them.
Okay. So in fact, when I was touring the army, the Chinese army, the Terracotta Daughters, from Shanghai, where they were first exhibited, to Paris, New York, Zurich, Mexico City, where you saw the images before, to bring it back to China to bury them, which was my the keystone of the project to me. So that was so important. In fact, during that world tour, I heard about the kidnapping of the Chibok girls. I was in the middle of the army of Terracotta Daughters, so girls' army, and I hear about those 276 girls who has been kidnapped in the safest place you could think of, which is school. That's what struck the world. We heard that in all news, and I remember, thinking, having a flash about, the army of girls and where I was standing with, and that news. And at the same time, I had some people were kept sending me and talking to me about the Ife heads from the 15th century, because the heads of the Terracotta Daughters are made apart from the body, because that's the technique 2000 years ago to put the necks inside the bodies. So when people were seeing those heads by themselves, the one from the China project, and the hair had lines that looked like the scarifications, people made that visual connection and sent it to me. See, so you are nourished from the inspiration of others, which I love. And I saw those Ife heads that I had never heard about before, because I'm not great in art history. And I had like a love at first sight. To me, no one could do better than this ever. And so I started to make some research about the Ife head and about Ife. And I saw that the myth of creation, the Yoruba myth of creation was all about clay, like you would find in the big monotheist religions. The fact that human being was created by the gods out of clay. And that clay in Ile Ife, was known in the Yoruba culture to be the cradle of humanity. So imagine, it's like incredible when you read that as a sculptor, you dream one day to be able to touch that clay, sculpt with that clay, when all my work since years were in link with myth of creation, with the question of, okay, how can you breathe life to a sculpture? So the spiritual aspect, like said in a very broad sense, of that clay fascinated me the same way I was drawn to Kumartuli in India to work with the Ganges River clay. So sculpture is my spine, clay is my muscles, let's say. So it's, for me, one of the materials that I really care the most. Even if I love working and trying so many different materials, I always get back to clay. And so working with that clay was a dream. And when, you know, it was maybe 4 years ago, so 1 year before COVID, that I had in mind that project, and I said, I'll do it. One day I'll go to Ife, one day. But then I got pregnant, and then COVID hit, and so, you know, life on a global scale, and so the day the frontier opened, the day I could, you know, take a ticket, I took a ticket, and I left to Nigeria, and that's where I met Adebontu. And that's how we went to Ife together, Ile Ife, and that's how we met the teachers at the university, and that's how in parallel we met with Mr. Yakubu, and you know, that's how we went to meet the Lorin Potters, and all of that happened in the first trips and research, but it was in gestation since 4 years.
Yeah, this is, yeah, it's fascinating, the metaphysics of your practice and these works. And this is a terrific image actually to show.
So that's the mold. We call it mother molds. In fact, the mother molds, because they are always the number one molds made of plaster directly on the sculpture, and out of that mold you can make a cat, but you can always redo a mold, which is what we done for the Terracotta Daughters, for example, because we were sculpting them. I was sculpting them first with the whole body, but then when we were molding them, we had to cut here at the neck, and then I had to recreate the neck and redo another mold that the necks would go inside the body. So sculpture we kind of forget that in our times, where everything goes so fast. But sculpture, unless you do 3D, you know, and 3D printing, 3D scanning, all of that, which sometimes I use as a tool, but really as a tool into the process, sculpture is really an old school techniques and long process. So, which I like, which I love, you know, the fact of needing all these steps, and into all these steps, molds is a key, and molds are a key. They, to me, are sometimes the most beautiful parts of a sculpture, and we don't even see it. So I some of them, I turned them into artworks. Here, it's not turned into an artwork, it's just exhibited into the show. You want to see the
there's a picture, isn't there? Do you like that?
Yeah, where we see how they are exhibited inside the show.
Girl.
Yeah, this one, exactly. Where we see, it was just a way inside the show, which is happening right now in Lagos. So we have the 8 sculpture that I sculpted. We made the molds from it. And then you have the army just by it. And you have also the movie. There is a movie that is exhibited and that explains the whole process and the collaboration. And we hear the voices of everyone who participated into the project. So for me, it's important to have part of the show also the process. Because, if you... There's something about seeing some sculptures in a white cube, but if you don't learn about the story of the process, you can miss a part which here into that project especially is key, because it's about the collaboration, like with the Terracotta Daughters, where there were a movie shown along the world tour and the exhibition of the army, because there were the relationship with Xian Feng, with the 8 girls, orphans we based the project on, and we are keeping in touch. We are still in touch along the way. There were 10 when I met them. There will be 30 when we will dig the army out, which was the age that I had when we buried the army. They were there.
Oh, that I wanted. Can you pull up that image of the burial site for the Terracotta Daughters? Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
So molds,
I think it's at the
are
end.
very important. Mother molds, we call them.
Mother molds.
Yeah, and the little bubble that you see, like the round things, are the nipples that are used to. So we call it also a matrice. You can say matrice. Yeah. So it's really, there is something about procreation with the molds. The matrice, the nipples. Yes. Mother molds, and I like that kind of the poetry of words, the poetry of the process. I work a lot with associations of ideas and visuals or words. So for me, it's that nourished my imagination for sure.
It's such an interesting tension. I must not have provided it. I'm sorry. I'm realizing it might not be there. So that raises this kind of broad question of replenishment and these cycles, and then the ephemeral that sits alongside. I'm curious to know how you have those two ideas together. How does ephemerality play into your practice?
It's not a rule, because I think rules are made to be disturbed all the time. But I like to have a spine. I see my process like a tree, in a way, where there would be the roots. And the roots are the researches of the specialists that I meet when I want to base the project and nourish to get the idea of the trunk. Here, the trunk would be the army of girls. And then the branches would be all the projects or sculptures that I would do inspired by the trunk. So I think that would be the idea of the process.
Yes. Okay. So growth. Yeah. So it does have this, this lifespan, and I just wonder. And again, I'm so struck by the idea of digging up the army of girls. That's 2030 and 2030.
But we are doing also a movie about it, because for me the continuation is super important. The link to everyone who participated into the project. So. Some of the girls now have kids already. 2.
It's amazing. Right?
It's incredible. And they are at the same time searching themselves into life, changing work, doing an internship here. So there is a whole story. There are some totally stuck by the COVID still right now, happening in Shanghai. So many big cities have shut down. So it turns that so many things are happening, where the project started in 2012 when Xi Jinping came to power. So it's a story about China, about the girls, about an artwork, and about the movement, but also the stillness, because while everything of this is happening, the sculptures are sleeping under the ground and waiting for us to come back and dig them up.
Wow, that's beautiful.
2030 is the year where the Chinese sociologists I've been working with, including the team of Li Chuzhou, said that there would be the highest imbalance, the peak of imbalance between men and women, so men in search of brides to get married to. But there is some hope, because it's always important to have some hope. It might be also the year where between the age of 0 and 5, the balance might come back to normal. So that's the biggest hope.
Because of your different changing policies. And so the last question I want to, you brought up film, you're making a film about this. So how do you understand the relationship of your work with the moving image and in sculpture?
For me, the moving image is super important, going back to ephemeral, the questions you had previously, which is the fact that nothing is permanent, definitely, but when we talk about clay that is not cooked, it's going to disappear. When you talk about an army that is meant to be buried, we don't know if we will find it. Like, will I remember the place in 2030? So all of that is you need, the image is everything. But I think for any artist, in fact, archives are keys. Archives is the richness of an artist. If you can collect, it's kind of, we are collectors of images in a way. So we need to collect the images of some that are totally let's say not planned, like totally authentic, some that are in fact staged, because they are important too, because they are some can be an artwork by themselves, just the fact of planning that kind of staged design of a work. So, and the moving image, the documentation in terms of movie, for me, again, it's important to show the process and how so many people are embedded into one project, are keys to making something happening. As a sculptor, even more, and as a sculptor who not only, but like doing some project of a certain scale, you cannot do it alone. It's a teamwork. It's a teamwork, and especially if me being French, living in New York City, what do I know about China? What do I know about Nigeria? What do I know about India? Key is a collaboration. Key are the people that helps me make that project possible, and that nourish the project and make it useful and logical and in a way real. Because if it doesn't work, if you do a project in China but it doesn't talk to people there and they don't believe in it because you didn't do enough research, you didn't respect the process or the people you've been working with enough, then what's the point? In fact, what's the point? The same way with the fact of burying the army. If I couldn't have done it, I think I would have done Harakiri. No, Japanese.
Wow, yeah.
Because for me, it was to make sense. It had to happen. So, and
that's a heroic. I mean, that's a massive. To bury them, I'm so mad I don't have the image for you. In 10 days, it's magnificent. The rose and the.
I got the
covering.
Answer. I was searching for 9 months for a place. I didn't want any money exchange. The day I got a call saying, "Okay, you can do it on my land, but it has to be in 10 days, and it's national holiday in China." I was like, "Oh my God, I will never make it happen." And I had to wire all my money, which was, a loan, to be able to make that in one night. And I remember it was the, worst night of my life.
But it happened.
But it happened. And yeah, that's why you have to take risks.
Yeah.
In fact.
Yeah.
And one of the books I got inspired by for the Ile-Ife project was in fact called Art and Risks in Ancient Yoruba. So it shows how risks is also, embedded with the Yoruba culture.
Oh, that's a whole other, wow, that would be fascinating to explore. Yeah, no, I really appreciate what you're saying about this, how you have kind of taken from film the way work is credited and brought it in, as I think Carolyn showed the slide of the names of all the students that worked on this project together.
So they all signed the pieces, and they all came to the exhibition. And I think that because they didn't know that exhibition would happen, so we invited them like a kind of surprise. But what now I didn't want to tell them, because I'm not sure I can make it happen. It's the world tour. I would love to make it travel. It would be incredible to bring it to Senegal, to Ghana, to South Africa, maybe why not to New York. So this is a dream. So let's make it happen.
It will happen. Yeah. It will happen. Should we open it up? Is it time? I forgot. I don't know what time it is. Actually, that's bad moderating. Oh, okay, good. So yeah. So how about are you okay with that? Opening
Absolutely.
it up are there any questions out there?
Yeah, great. Let's see. Thank you so much, both of you, for this conversation. Our first question is going to be from our friend GE. I'm going to let you unmute.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you for the Brooklyn Rail to bringing this here to us today. I'm so haunted by this work. And I have a very simple question. Do you see your practice, Prune, as attempts to collapse the boundaries between art and life?
Between art and life?
To collapse the boundaries between them, yes.
Yes, I love that question. Thank you for it. In fact, I think as an artist, it's not even a choice. It's happening. I thought I was working as a scientist very objectively, and in fact, I realized that it was impossible. As an artist, you cannot be objective. You are subjective. And I realized that right after I buried the army in China, I went to the Chiapas jungle to work with an anthropologist that invited me. She was working since 8 years with the Mayan Lacandones, and we did a project about, in fact, the frontier between humanity and animality, the notion of soul. And I felt very tired during that trip. And when I went back in France, it was in France at that time, I did a checkup. And at 31, I discovered I had breast cancer. That was, like a thunderstorm on me. And as we were mentioning, for a movie, for an artist, archives, this is your richness. Years and years, I had collected images of my past projects, just because, that's what was left of so many ephemeral projects. But when suddenly I'm going through chemo, and I have my friends telling me, your luck as an artist is that anything you do, what happened to you, you can transform into art, and it can help you. And they put a camera in my hands and said, okay, do something. And I was at my first surgery, and I had the camera in hand. And instead of thinking about the pain, I was laughing with the doctors and the nurses, because, for the first time they were filmed during the operation, the surgery. So it was another, I was continuing the collection, in fact. And then, so chemo is confirmed, I have to freeze my eggs, and it brings me back to the procreative dinner and the sperm bar I had done. And I start looking into the past images of that time, because I'm into a hospital that, reminds me of something. And I realize I'm talking to the same team that I interviewed years before. And I find into the archives images, me filming, I have the camera, I film a microscope, and there is the voice of the woman working there who tells me, oh, these are the eggs of that woman. She's going through breast cancer, so we have to freeze her eggs in case she wants babies after her chemo. And there I am years after at exactly the same place. So sometimes, you know, things are, even if you think you're far away from them, just the fact of working about them, of having that intuition that something is there, means that it's subjective, you're part of it, something is happening, it's part of your life, it's part of your DNA, it's part of whatever you believe in. And I called it serendipity, in fact, through that movie that I made and named Serendipity, because collecting and putting all these images together of all the projects I had done along 10 years, I saw so many links to what I was going through. And that's where it just brought me another perspective on what I was doing.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Great, thank you, GE. Thank you, Prune. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Eleanor, for a question next.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you so much, Yasmeen and Prune. I wanted to ask, how does your practice navigate or address colonial legacies of the places in which you make work, especially considering France's imperial history in many countries of Africa?
Yeah, that's a very good question, which is, one of the biggest fear for all of my projects. So for me, that's where the collaboration is key, absolute key, and wouldn't make sense without it. And for the project in Nigeria, it was the main idea of the project is to do it in Ile-Ife, exhibit it in Lagos, travel it in Africa, and it's going to stay into the permanent collection of a public museum in Africa. So that's the way, trying to just doing in the way that feel the most right, not only to me, but mainly for the people I collaborate with and the places I work at, is the only way to do it. But it's true that as an artist, you try to think or feel above the frontiers, but the history is always watching at us. So this is, as universal you can try to do a project, the project has to be done in the right way. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense, the way I explain it?
Okay, thank you, Prune. Thank you, Eleanor.
By the way, I wanted today on that discussion to have the collaborators of the project in Nigeria with me on the conversations, but I'm not sure it was possible for the team, so it didn't happen, but we tried.
Thank you. And for our final question today, we have one from our very own Fang Bui. Should be able to unmute us.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you, Prune. Thank you, Yasmeen, for a wonderful conversation. I learned so much. I was in and out because it's the last day of the winter issue, so I was interrupted. I can't wait to re-listen to it later. My question is fairly simple, in that it's so unique that you and JR, as two, artists who have similar vision, because when we interviewed Jean-Claude and Crystal, it was clear they can be thought in the same way, but Jean-Claude, the one who had to oversee all the paperwork, so Crystal can be more autonomously focused on the creative side. That was the whole collaboration between the between two of them. But you and JR are independent artists, share similar vision. And the reason I'm asking, because in 2007, our friend Ai Weiwei did this remarkable project where he raised several million, and then he just brought 1,001 Chinese from different provinces, different social background and whatnot, and brought them as a living work of art to the city of Kassel for Documenta, 2007, I believe. And there are certain kind of similar thinking in a way, but my question again is that how did you and JR manage to have similar vision, and when did it happen? And that thinking in that kind of public front, the ability to mobilize project like this is no joke, because most artists tend to have a certain hermetic temperament existent, you know. Occasionally they will do things like that, but super rare. So I was just asking, where did that come from? And how did it materialize? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you for mentioning artists that I love, you know, Ai Weiwei, Christo, that I was very, very lucky to meet during the Lake Iseo. 2 days after I learned about my cancer, I was in Tuscany and I called him and his nephew, and they welcomed me with, you know, open arms on the boat. And on the path to walk with him on water. And I think I had the biggest smile after the biggest, you know, tears of my life, thanks to him. So I really care for him. And Jia, who is obviously one of my favorite artists too, especially what he's just done 2 days ago for Iran. You know, I think it's just you are in the right place to call it a family of artists, maybe, which I'm not. I think we just do whatever we care for, or what drives us. I think everyone has a mission in life. It can be very, very, very different, very broad. It can be one time of your life. It can be all along your life. For an artist, you can judge his practice, her practice on a whole life. So I hope it will be long. You know, I aim to 98 for now. But what I know is that I don't know anything else. I don't know to do anything else. So for me, this sculpture is my spine. If I share the same values that artists and people of my time, I feel so lucky about it. I met Ai Weiwei, I met Christo, I know JR since we are about 18. So, you know, these are friends, these are people that you know, I'm very, very lucky to know and live at the same time as them. But what I know is that every artist has a different process. So you can share the same values, but the process will be very different. The way of expression will be very different. But the fact of being able to discuss, share, exchange during a lifetime with other artists is the biggest richness. So I try to surround myself with as many artists as possible, and New York is the best way for that. That's what I love, that city. Best place for that.
Well, thank you. It's super true.
Is the best place for that. Central. Yeah, of course. I'm joking.
Yeah, it was great. I can't wait to hear the whole thing again. Thank you so much, and congratulations on this beautiful project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Fong. And thank you both again so much. We have a tradition here at the Rail of ending our community events with a poetry reading. And today I'm so thrilled to welcome our poet laureate of the day, Manal Kara, to the stage. Manal Kara is a Moroccan-American self-taught artist working across sculpture, photography, installation, video, and text. They've held several recent solo exhibitions, including Hypothèse, currently on view at Montreal. If anyone has the chance to go see, please do. And I'll turn it over to you, Manal. Thank you again.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Thank you, Carolyn, for the introduction and for inviting me. And thanks to Prune and Yasmeen for that dialogue. Okay, I have a few poems I'll just read straight through. Rode hard and put up wet. It is now 9 o'clock at dawn. card-carrying member of the order Lepidoptera, how to become a vessel or keep emptiness at bay. Scrolling through the headlines, I once again fall prey to an insatiable idiom. The scene is simply furnished. Yellow pine timbers, a grain of wheat. My friends gather in the eaves, making nests in the corner of the collected botany. Believe me, I try not to hold your doings in my palm, but the earth is meddlesome too. Things want for themselves. Bootleg patches hang summer long in my investiture, waiting there to be understood as a feeling or something you might conceive as being on the side of the particular. I have no name yet for such a condition, though to speak of it is an act of conjuring, and its title may leak in and out as from a wet page. How could I possibly have been transformed into this windless sarcophagus, pissing in piles and walking myself on a leash? A specter is haunting my ass. The fountain of Narcissus evaporated. I find myself trapped in my house, shouting at vegetables. Ritual pollution. The rock enters. The spiral is at the front door. In our shared metaphysics, there is no room for separation between subject and object. Rage is the bridge. Behold the junkyard and a leaflet poet's investment in leaflets. I have no more feeling for falling leaves at any oblique angle to my own governance, mild in nature and abroad, godsmacked by equanimity, as if I could just exist on a sidewalk, couldn't dare to countenance a roomier spread. I go to bakeries, my liver grown long and gaze full of you, any solid flesh you have, I haven't yet in the fixity of my palm, and me too, a savage voyeur, clambering aboard like a pup. When, where, and in what stages to do it. It's very top of mind, deciding about unlined pants, truth teller to soothe, and other, the vain and superficial, with gratitude. Here, in a dresser drawer, one lone mouth could belong to anybody on the face of the world. But the globe has two faces, one east and one south, and more besides. Give me the hell that I want, I said, and more besides. The seasons are large and laying eggs. I suddenly don't need any odyssey. I'm immaculate and terrifying. Even the fruits have ceased their whispering. In a way, I never think of the past. Only the future can hide its disdain for you. Dolefully, I pull small pieces of paper from my mouth and arrange them in the form of a smile. In a better month, we might have had reason. I see the words spill over you in fantasy. This is not a dynamic feature. Given our previous troubles with interfacing, I see the necessity of an unhinged management of assets. I proceed into the market stall, using one small eye to buy bread and a larger one to avert my gaze. More tenderly toward the inhuman voice. Now he begins to drink, forgetting he's at the airport. Here are his peels of dark hair, laughing and falling, falling and laughing. River dark, like the roaming grounds of catfish, like the yellow on the windows of a chain-smoking household. People don't understand what I mean when I say he hasn't been sleeping, that he was too sick for 10 years, that he's sick now. Little birds are laughing everywhere. Behold my organism for weeping. At last I have reached the last of the colonial architecture. I have one more. Ontologically, the weeks and minutes unfold like filthy carpet inside my body, the squirrel eating the coyote, its rancid flesh. I've decided to make a mess of futility, futurity. I have no idea where I'm going. Just wanted to see how you'd react with my leg dangling out of your mouth. Though many-sided, a paragraph offers only one entrance. My mouth is a soiled cylinder. Wandering and exile make their way into my erotic logos. I take a short pause at the next station, look back at strangers laughing before boarding again in earnest and unwrapping my gorgeous sandwiches. Once you find out that you can, you also find out that you don't have to. Here's my list of demands. Day unmarred by night, skin as soft as a serpent's. I'm dispatching my organs in search of a small corner from which to resist the production of categories, screaming, whose fist destroyed our land? Words are agentive, and that's what makes them terrifying. Truthfully, I could not ask them to be faithful. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Manal. That was incredible. And thank you, Prune and Yasmeen. Such a great event today. We'd like to thank everyone at Art 21 Lagos for helping make today's event possible. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible. You can view today's event and our full archive on the Rails YouTube channel. We'll be up there shortly. For the past 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has provided a platform for the arts, culture, and politics through our monthly publication and public events like here in our daily NSE. This holiday season helped us sustain our work and reach our goal of raising $150,000 this month towards the which will go towards the Rail's operations. Your support will keep our issues and events free. You can donate via the link in the chat. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for Entre Dos Palabras Existe Otra, a Rail reading curated by Amelia Bande. And you can now turn your microphone on and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all again so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, and
Bye.
wonderful poetry too.
Much
Gratitude, much gratitude. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Manal.
For the beautiful reading also.